uh, participating in our AMA today. Happy International Women's Day, which is a day to celebrate female achievement, to encourage and inspire one another, and to thank the women in our lives. And this AMA and our special guests are going to allow us to do just that. Our guest today will be Melanie Bachman, who's the Executive Director of the Connecticut Siting Council. But before we get into the AMA, just a few announcements. So we started the AMAs during the pandemic, and we're thrilled to be able to continue them. They provide us an opportunity to have conversations with women leaders in energy and environment, and an opportunity for you to ask them questions. And they've become so successful that they are now part of our regular programming. And thanks in part to our sponsors. We have sponsors for individual events as well as annual sponsors. And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank our annual sponsors, which include my firm, Robinson & Cole, Eversource, the Mass Clean Energy Center, National Grid, Orsted, Stone Turn, and BHB. These sponsors make our virtual as well as our in-person events possible, and we are very thankful for their support. We have a few more upcoming events that we'd love to tell you about. In honor of Women's History Month, we are actually going to be doing a bonus AMA this month. This Friday, March 10th, from 12 to 1. Our speakers will be Nicole Robinson and Monet Williams of McKinsey & Company, who are the authors of the Women in the Workplace report. They will present the report and then provide an opportunity for people to ask a summary of the report, and present an opportunity for people to ask questions. We also have upcoming our annual awards gala, which is scheduled for April 27th from 6 to 9 p.m. at the Westin Copley Place in Boston. We've just announced yesterday our keynote, which will be Maria Robinson of the U.S. Department of Energy, and our awardees. Sponsorships and tickets are still available for the gala. If you are interested in sponsoring or attending, we'd love to see you there. We also have an upcoming event for our rising professionals. On March 22nd, it will be a hybrid event. It starts at 5:30. It's a Lead the Table workshop. And it's intended to educate the attendees on the value of each type of leader, and then provide them opportunities to discover their own leadership style. For those attending in person, you'll get an opportunity to connect with other rising professionals at the Redemption Rock Brewing Company in Worcester, Mass. Information about all of these upcoming programs is available on our website, and we'd love to have you join us. We are also in the process of setting up our next set of mentor-mentee matchups. Mentor signups are currently going on. If you are interested in being a mentor, please visit our website and sign up by March 21st. After that, we will seek mentees. Mentees must be members of NEWIEE to participate. If you are interested in learning more about becoming a member, we would love to have you join our organization, and you can do so by visiting our website. Okay, so lastly, just some housekeeping. So we want this event to be as interactive as it possibly can be and conversational. So to ask questions, please put your questions in the Q&A, not the chat function. We will try to get to all of them. I have some questions already set up that I've received from some people in advance of today's meeting. But please start thinking about your questions and sending them our way. With that, I would like to take the opportunity to introduce Melanie Bachman. She is the Executive Director at the Connecticut Siting Council, and she's also counsel to the Connecticut Siting Council. She wears two hats there, and we are thrilled to have her. Thank you so much, Melanie, for being here today.
Thank you for the invitation, Joey Lee. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. It's nice to see your face.
And yours. So Melanie, why don't we just jump right in? How do you explain to people outside of the industry what the Siting Council does? What's your elevator speech when someone says, well, what do you do?
Haha, that's an excellent question. We, when asked that question, we explain that we review and evaluate land from an environmental perspective for suitability or possibilities to mitigate impacts to the environment in the construction of, and we just say, cell towers and high voltage transmission lines. It's still a little bit confusing to people, and they really don't understand that it's somewhat of a quasi-judicial process that we engage in. But I often explain it to people as the process is similar to a divorce. Nobody wins, but at least it was fair. Sometimes that'll get a snicker, but other than that, you really can't get a sense of it unless you really sit in on one of our public hearings. But typically, that's how we'll explain it. Is we look at the land because we are often mistaken for the Siting Council, the Siting Council with a C, and one gentleman did refer to us as the Siting Council, like the siding you put on your house. So many names, but we answer to all of them.
And early on in the Siting Council's lifespan, it really did focus a lot on utility siting. And then, as you pointed out, it does telecommunications siting. But, in the 90s, there was restructuring, and now there are things that are done by competitive entities like electric generating facilities and so forth that I know also come before you. How have you seen in the 15 years you've been at the Siting Council things change, the focus of the council change? Is there now, for instance, a heavy focus on storage?
Generally, our energy and telecommunications sides have maintained equilibrium. About 50% of the work is brought in by each. That's typically driven by, technology upgrades or, legislative changes, policy changes. One example would be, back in 2005, when we were incentivizing peaking generation, a process was developed. It's often described as expedited, but it's no different than a process that existed in the Uniform Administrative Procedure Act for as long as it's existed, is a petition for a declaratory ruling for a new facility that, would either provide, fast start resource in the event that we had some shortage, but it also touched upon the renewable facilities. And so since probably about that time, maybe a little thereafter, we've been inundated with, petitions for declaratory rulings for solar facilities, fuel cell facilities, one wind facility, in addition to modifications to existing facilities, which are typically submitted by a petition. There's this kind of a cycle. If there's an RFP issued by DEEP or a utility sponsored RFP, once a selection is made, we can see that, we're going to get a whole bunch of projects in, X amount of time. The battery storage, we've been anxiously awaiting for a few years now, but we have yet to receive a new petition for a battery storage facility. There's one facility that has battery storage co-located with solar out in Norwich. And that was probably from about 2015, I think. But we haven't received a battery storage alone facility as of yet, but we expect it.
Now, the Siting Council is a state agency. What role do municipalities play in the siting of these kinds of facilities?
Well, contrary to popular opinion amongst the legislature right now, municipalities actually get a sneak preview before any project is submitted to the Siting Council. Possibly not required for the petitions for the new facilities, yet developers do comply with the spirit and intent of what's known as the municipal consultation. And so for a generating facility, at least 60 days before an application is submitted to the council, the project developer is required to consult with the host municipality and the various commissions and boards. They may have to host a public information meeting and attend, the Wetlands Commission meeting, the Conservation Commission meeting, for at least 60 days. And sometimes these municipal consultations can extend for about a year or 10. But the municipalities have the opportunity before the petition or the application is submitted to provide comments to the project developer. When the project is submitted to us, we solicit their comments on the project. They have an opportunity to either submit written comments or become a party or an intervener to actively participate in the quasi-judicial proceeding. They also have, if they do, obtain party or intervener status, then, they could appeal the siting council's decision. And certainly we're always available, for procedural questions about our process for any, town official or any interested person, really the neighbors. But there is a substantial amount of collaboration that does occur before we receive the project. And we do often receive emails about projects that we know nothing about from neighbors. Please deny this, project, but we have yet to receive any, filing for it. So we do acknowledge those letters and say, we'll keep them in the file if the project is submitted to us in the future.
And part of the role of the siting council, as you talked about, is sort of looking at the environmental impacts of a project. And depending on the petition or the certificate process, what the council needs to engage in is slightly different. How does that work with the other counterparts in the state, like DEEP, et cetera? Do you interact with DEEP? Are they involved in the process, for those who are unfamiliar?
For a petition for a new facility and an application for a certificate, the project developer is required, to provide notice of the filing of the application or petition to a list of agencies. It's in our statute. They're all state agencies: DEEP, PURA, OPM, SHPO. There's a whole list. And so a copy is submitted, and then once it's submitted to the council, what we'll do is we'll solicit their comments and input consistent with the requirement of the statute. It's not, raising these agencies up to a level of party status by any means. We all know that state agencies right now have some pretty limited resources. So we do, traditionally we have been receiving regular comments from DEEP that, cover the whole, the whole agency, water concerns, land concerns, air concerns. There's a gentleman at DEEP that historically has submitted some very detailed comments that we do use in our proceedings. And certainly we've had comments from the Department of Public Health, State Historic Preservation, Council on Environmental Quality. We do interact a lot with DEEP because we do share our building with the PURA side and the Bureau of Energy and Technology Policy. But certainly we are invited sometimes to some of their concierge desk pre-application meetings, which is probably more helpful for everyone to have all of us on the same call in case there are siting council questions. And it's I appreciate being invited to those. It makes our collaboration a lot easier.
That's great. What's the one piece of advice you would give to someone appearing before the Connecticut Siting Council, or the biggest piece of advice that you think that people should be aware of?
Do not underestimate the Siting Council. We are not a rubber stamp. If you have process questions, please ask them. I don't recommend coming in blind or, assuming that the procedure and the process. That doesn't usually work out well, whether it's in person or remote. So the best advice I could give you is ask as many questions as you want. We will answer them, and learn as much as you can. Maybe watch one of the videos of a past hearing on our website, because we have that option now, and kind of get a sense of how things move. But that is the best advice I could give, is just know the procedure, know what's in bounds, what's out of bounds, and just a general decorum of your role, and if don't interject, especially when the presiding officer is speaking.
How does the siting council weigh and address concerns of landowners that are nearby, the abutting property owners, in their evaluation of an application or a petition?
Depending on the concern and if it's jurisdictional to us, sometimes there are things that, are not possible for us to order. Generally with these facilities, I mean, if we talk about a cell tower, or a wind turbine, we're talking about the height and the visibility and, the visibility footprint, right? Because people enjoy parks and they go to the park, and then now there's something they didn't actually see before, and it's a mar on the skyline of, what they used to view. A lot of concerns are, like stormwater related. Could this possibly, damage my property? Is there going to be landscaping? And we take those comment letters and the comments that are spoken during the hearing, and we transform them into questions to the project developer. What could you move this associated equipment or shift it so that it would be less visible from this neighborhood? But there's always a word of caution there, because once you shift something away from someone's neighborhood, you're shifting it into someone else's neighborhood. And that's a difficult balance. And that's basically what we do, is we balance competing interests from neighbors and the towns and the state agencies and legislators, and we balance them all and find the most utilitarian solution if we find that there's a public benefit for the facility and that it won't have a substantial adverse environmental impact that couldn't be mitigated.
We talked a little bit about the changes you've seen in the 15 years you've been at the Siting Council. Where do you see the energy landscape going? We've talked a little bit about storage, and I think everyone is expecting storage to make some big entrance at some point to every state, not just Connecticut. Utility scale solar, wind. What do you think the opportunities are for those, continuing opportunities are for those? Reading the tea leaves, of course.
Reading the tea leaves, I do see solar to continue to be submitted. Utility scale, possibly not, given the farm and forest bill. It generally, what we've been seeing are smaller projects, less than 2 megawatts. We never thought we would receive a certificate for a certificate application for a utility scale solar project, because we never thought that we would see one over 65 megawatts, right? Because that's the threshold for a petition. But we were wrong. So that's a perfect example of not reading the tea leaves properly, that, these projects would, actually start coming in. The battery storage, definitely something that we anticipate seeing often. Wind is dead, at least on land. And offshore wind seems to be, one of these topics. And people ask, oh, does the Siting Council have jurisdiction over the offshore wind turbines? And I smile and say, maybe not the turbines, because they're in federal waters, but that interconnection, we've got that. So we anticipate some serious, submarine cable discussions in the near future as well. But the renewable development, we do expect to continue on, in the same volume as we've seen in the past couple of years, which has really picked up. And during the pandemic, we haven't been that busy in over a decade. We just got hit.
And what is the biggest challenge that the council's facing in 2023? Is it remote participation? Is it staffing? What do you see as the biggest challenge this year?
Biggest challenge for us this year is in fact staffing. We had a technical analyst with over 30 years of experience retire. We also had one of our administrative staff members resign at the end of the year. And so we're down an administrative staff member, but we've gained a career trainee And we also have an opening for the administrative position. But that's the real challenge is, do we have enough staff? But even if we hadn't, more staff, we can't create more Tuesdays and Thursdays, right, in a year. So council members, for those who don't know, are per diem. They're not state employees. They don't have offices in a building. They get paid $200 per event. So like a teacher, you get paid for, in class time, but you don't get paid for your preparation time. I just couldn't see, the council, let alone the staff, being able to keep up with, every day, Monday through Friday, having public hearings and meetings. And that's what it would require. Because if we hadn't gone remote during the pandemic, we'd probably still be catching up on some of those matters if we had done them in person. Because the logistics are so much more complicated.
So being remote has actually made it more efficient for the siting council to do its work then.
Absolutely. And, with the aid of the, technical tools we have today, right, with Google Earth and satellite imagery and drones and, a field review is not required by law. Historically, yes, we've done field reviews. We've had some concern about that in terms of liability. If someone gets injured, we're out there. If it's a cell tower application, probably don't have cell service. You go, it's 2 o'clock, you do a field review, you're wearing muddy boots and you're checking yourself for ticks, 2 minutes before the hearing's supposed to start at the town hall. It has been a lot more efficient for us. Absolutely. Because the timing, right? The drive times, and you can actually just sit in front of your computer the whole time that you would be driving. So we have experienced, it was pretty amazing how many hearings we did hold that year. I think it was like 22 remote hearings between May and December.
Do you anticipate the council will ever go back to live hearings?
I don't anticipate it at this time because, again, the position being per diem and the logistics so complicated. I think a lot of the members actually prefer it. I know the staff does prefer it. We used to have to, load the entire record into the Siting Council mobile. We'd have to drive across the state, check, is there traffic? Take us, over an hour to get there. We've set up the room. We have to get to the, the site. We have to make sure all the council members get to the site. And the worst part was the dinner, right? So we took a break at 5 o'clock and we had a public comment session starting at 6:30. So some places don't actually have restaurants, within a mile or two. And we have been criticized for being late to the public comment session because of this dinner that, everybody has to rush through this dinner. We gotta get back to the hearing. So it's a lot less hectic in a remote capacity.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about you Melanie, and your career path. So you have actually 2 roles at the Siting Council, executive director and staff attorney. Tell us about how those roles complement and maybe sometimes conflict with each other, if at all.
Well, I didn't realize until I saw this list that OPM and the governor's office had put together that I have a 3rd role too. That's the legislative liaison. I just rolled that into the executive director position, though. It's just something that was always there. Sometimes, yes, they do somewhat conflict. As the legal advisor, you tend to strictly interpret our criteria by statute. You look at case law to see, how far did we possibly expand it. As a challenge as an executive director is, members might recommend something that may or may not be within our expertise or jurisdiction, but they're my clients as well. And so you're trying to find a way. It's a it's an interesting path. Sometimes we get there and sometimes we don't. But again, it's kind of like a divorce. We came to a fair conclusion, but as the staff attorney and the executive director, it's difficult to be in two places at once. But I have such a phenomenal group of staff members that support me very well, and know when to jump in. I don't have to ask them. If there's something that I need to be at and they could cover it for me, I get a few offers. Hey, if you need me to do that, I could do that for you. So it hasn't been terribly overwhelming, but it is two positions, and I just do the best that I can.
Now, you went to UConn Law and you had an environmental focus. What drew you to that focus, and how's that assisted you in your current role?
I grew up on a property that was completely surrounded by Connecticut Audubon Sanctuary. And so I had 10 acres plus of woodlands to explore throughout my childhood, and I grew to appreciate nature. So when I did get into law school, there was a professor there, Professor Strasser, who was very encouraging and supported me. And my thesis was environmental crime. And so I was seeking to, hold corporate officers personally liable for environmental mishaps, I suppose, was a little extreme at that time, but he certainly helped me along. And when I actually did see him later at a CPES event at UConn Law, I did go over and thank him very much, because I probably wouldn't be in this position if it weren't for him.
And you are the executive director and staff attorney now, but you started out as staff attorney. How did you end up in the role of executive director / legislative liaison?
Well, how I ended up in the staff attorney position is actually funny as well. So I'll start there. It was we had an executive director there was an intern, and so the position was created in the hopes that the intern would just move into the staff attorney position full time, but she got a better offer. So in the meantime, I interviewed, and I'll be honest, when I interviewed, I came home and thought to myself, there's no way that I could work with that guy. If anyone knows Derek Phelps, he's very intense, and he had 2 phones, and he's playing with his phones, and he's asking questions, and he's in your face. I thought, I just don't think I can work with this guy. And so I got the job. And Derek and I, although we didn't see eye to eye, we had to get to know each other at first. But we were one of the best teams when it came to, I would listen, he would speak. If he stumbled, I would take over. We could finish each other's sentences. It really grew to appreciate each other. Our careers grew together. And then he decided that he was going to resign, because the administration changed, and it was sad. And another executive director was appointed, and she lasted for 2 years, and she made it abundantly clear that she was going to commit to 2 years because she wanted to retire. And so the position was open around 2012, and similar to the staff attorney position, I guess Governor Malloy at the time had interviewed someone that he really wanted, but it was for a different position. And so he asked that person if they would be interested in the executive director position. And the evening public hearings became a sticking point. And it does go to a work-life balance type issue too, is, if you're working evenings and you have a family, you have to make arrangements. And so I think she had requested maybe the state to cover the child care, which didn't fly. And so by default, I became the executive director.
Well, it was one of the best decisions I think the state of Connecticut made by default. So
they did vote me as the executive director during a meeting. So there are minutes there, but people still often call me the acting executive director. I don't care about the title, I just do the job.
You mentioned evening hearings. How do you maintain a work-life balance, having to work evenings, maybe 2 evenings a week?
It's exhausting. And I'll say 15 years ago, sure, no problem. I had plenty of energy. A few logistics needed to be set up because it's not it's sporadic evenings, right? It's not a set schedule. So, when a hearing gets scheduled, then you got to look ahead and say, okay, I have to make arrangements. Just because we work, at night and we get back to our houses at 11:30 p.m., we still have those responsibilities that we would have had at 5:30 p.m. And we're still expected to be in the office in the morning, right? So it is very exhausting. We do try and avoid 2 evening events, during a week, but sometimes it's unavoidable. But the best thing I can tell you is, whoever's covering for you, just make it up to them later, if you can, because you get comp time, or at least I get comp time, and I never use the comp time. So, it doesn't really balance out. Someone suggested to me, oh, why don't you just take the comp time you earned the night before the next day? But you have to be in the office the next day because you just missed the entire day. So it's emails and mail and what have you. It is difficult. But we try and keep it to a minimum because, again, for the council members, we have 2 members that are state agency, designees. They have to be in the office the next day too.
What aspects of your roles do you find most rewarding, and what do you find to be most challenging?
I find relationships to be the most rewarding because I'm able to interact with so many different types of people from so many different types of backgrounds and perspectives. Anytime we have some kind of a project pending, I have the ability to talk to, town officials, state officials, legislators, neighbors, people that I never would have met but for this position. Longstanding, relationships with, other council, the energy bar. The education, what does the siting council do? Helping someone understand our process. I find that very rewarding. That is my favorite part of the job. The most challenging for me is the politics. And the siting council is not a political animal by any means. It's not meant to be. But certainly it's an attractive nuisance for politics. And we do have to navigate through them like any other government agency. But that tends to be the most challenging for me because, a lot of these legislative proposals, they come up and people, oh, we need an answer now, or it's, 30 seconds before a public hearing and I can't be at the public hearing because I'm at my own public hearing. That's one thing with this, remote operations that I appreciate the most is that if I do miss a public hearing or a public meeting that was, a legislative committee, I can watch it on YouTube. But that tends to be the most challenging because you're trying to explain a process and sometimes people, they're just listening to you and it's, a formality, but they're not really listening to you.
If you were given unlimited authority and an unlimited budget, what would be the biggest change you would make?
I would make 3 small changes that might amount to a big change. And I want to make sure that we're assuming it's not ratepayer funded.
That's right.
Okay.
We can assume that.
Okay. Pay the members more for per diem. I would get drones for the analysts, and I would get a dedicated mail courier for the administrative staff. I don't think we need any more, staff members. I just think if we had those items, we could be so much more effective. Because the mail that comes out of our office, Lisa Matthews has to take a cart, a 2-tier cart, and the mail is probably about a foot thick that the council members get every week. So it'd just be nice if someone could come pick that up for her.
Well, and you also get, each of them get a foot thick, but you get 20 or 30 copies of everything, right? That come into you first to be distributed out, right?
What's funny is when our offices were closed in the early days of the pandemic, we were inundated with requests for modifications to towers. So much that we had to schedule a day to go into the office as a team and literally go through all the papers, because we have a copy cubicle and the entire copy cubicle was filled under the counter and up above the cube wall with applications. They're not really applications, but they're requests. But you have 3 copies of those each request, and you have 90 requests. It does become a little daunting, the mountain of paper.
So what what skills do you think you use the most often in your role as a leader at the Siting Council?
Collaboration, team-oriented problem solving. We're such a small group that it just lends itself to that type of collaboration, and it helps us to be more consistent in our decision making from similar matters to other similar matters. I try and exude enthusiasm for what we do. I think it's great. I love what we do. I love my job. Every year I make the staff and the members a calendar with pictures of facilities that we've approved that are now in operation. And it also serves as a reminder for all of our regular meeting dates and when the full moons occur. And I guess more, that education is just such a huge part of our process, because if you talk to somebody down at the coffee shop, have you ever heard of the Siting Council? They don't know. But if we've been in their neighborhood, they know who we are. So it's a lot of education, and the industries that the facilities are so complicated. A lot of people don't really understand how complicated the process actually is.
Following up on that, what is the best way for people to track what's in front of the council? What step some kind of project is in? What phase it's in with respect to your organization's review of it?
Our website, we pride ourselves on that website because we have links to pending matters that will give a full list of everything that's pending throughout the state, meaning it's under review. We also have a decisions page where you could search for either certificates or declaratory rulings, and you can do it either by number or you can do it by town. And so each town has its own page that has links to every single facility we've ever approved or modified in that town, to the extent possible. We were born back in 1972. Docket 1, it may have been scanned by one of our many interns over the decades, but we try and make our website as user-friendly as possible. And I know the state migrated to a very stiff format where it didn't give you a lot of flexibility. In case you just didn't fit the box, you had to force your agency to fit into that format. And I think we tried to do the best that we could, but we're always looking for feedback, from people who regularly use it. We have a statewide telecommunications database. A lot of our publications are on there, like our forecast report, our transmission line life cycle report. Probably from the past 10 years, we try and keep as many reports on as we can, but that is the best way to keep abreast of Siting Council events. And certainly you can email our office directly from the website if you have general questions.
Well, today is International Women's Day and it's Women's History Month. So let's talk a little bit about the women in your life, for instance. Who have been some of your role models and what about them do you admire?
Well, of course, my mom, role model, she supported me in everything that I've done. In this particular field, since I've become a lawyer, my top law role model is Judge Alexandra DiPantima, because I was fortunate to be able to work for her as a temporary worker from an agency. And it just opened my eyes to, hey, I could go to law school too. And, look at Judge DiPantima, look at her career. It's admirable and something to, aspire to. When you asked me to do the interview, Joey Lee, I mentioned to you how coincidental it was, because we had lost a member of the bar, Marianne Dubuque, who was probably the kindest, most gentle, serious mentor I've ever met, supportive of women in energy and in law, and just to be a mentor. I think Marianne, I don't know where she found the time to mentor when she was, practicing law full time. She had 3 kids. She lit candles every day at church for the people that she lost. She dropped off sandwiches for the homeless. Marianne definitely was very influential for the short time that I was able to work with her. And I'm not talking about professionally. She, if my pet was sick, she'd send me a card, or, just really taking it to a level where, we're not adversaries. We're women in law, and we're in energy, and we're proud of it. And so she really did make an impact on me. And one of my other role models, who works for Eversource Energy, has a very similar position to mine as a manager. And it's interesting how similar situations we encounter, one on the public side and one on the private side, but still an organization is an organization. And the challenges as a manager that you confront every day. And she has been integral in, sometimes you just have to vent, and you let people vent with you, and that's how ideas are born. So those would probably be the 3 top Connecticut-born women in energy that have been very influential in my life.
And you talked about Marianne and her mentorship, and the what has been the importance of mentorship in your career? How has that helped you to advance to where you are?
Well, as you know, these industries they're very complicated. There is just something to learn every day. So, there's so much to learn. I just remember Kevin Delgado, is a former DPUC commissioner, had said to me, I go home at night at 5 and I read ISO reports until 9, and then I go get a beer. So, there's just so much to learn, yet, you learn from each other. So that's the importance of mentorship is, other women who have practiced in this area and seen how, the policies have changed, or how they're shaped or designed, or you may have written a brief that was on point of something that somebody else is confronting today. I think it's really important because it is so complex and it's ever changing, that you might want to talk to someone. I wish that Tony Fitzgerald, who you also worked for Carmody and Torrance, I think he was practicing when the Siting Council was born. So if there is anyone who is the real expert in why is this provision in the statute, where did this come from? There's always this question, what would Tony do? That's important to share knowledge so that it follows through in the future, so that we can reflect back and maybe make a better choice or expand upon a good one.
What advice do you have for younger women entering the profession, either the energy or the telecom or environmental fields, and looking to gain experience that might be similar to yours or just generally in those fields?
I would say learn as much as you possibly can. And if there are opportunities to participate in conferences on topic, whether it be a NEWIEE or CPES or even like a deep sponsored forum, attend and get involved. For I see that you have a young professionals group. They have meetings. Go to those meetings because you never know who you're going to meet, and you never know what you're going to learn, and that's how doors are open. And not only that, but you could be helping somebody else too.
What is it that we, as I'll use the word seasoned people in the industry, can do to empower other women to help promote and retain female leaders as we move forward in this very different world than it was just 3 years ago?
I think a flexible work schedule is important. I really do, because women or young women entering into a career, they have a personal life as well, and the work-life balance is so important that I think as more seasoned professionals who had raised their family while they worked 90 hours a week, those are resources for you. How did you do it? What were your what were the challenges? I really think it's important for understand how can you make it work, what worked for you, what didn't. Some people, they may have a spouse or a significant other that travels for work too, and there's a lot of logistics that need to be worked out. So I think other people's experiences are invaluable to someone just entering into the field.
What advice would you give your 25-year-old self if you could go back in time?
I think I would say I was 5 years too late, because I took 5 years off between undergrad and law school. But I say that with the reservation that the 5 years in between helped me decide exactly what it was that I wanted to do. And I would not have met Judge DiPentima if I hadn't taken those 5 years off.
What in your life has brought you or given you the greatest satisfaction or fulfillment?
I would have to say my house. It's a symbol of, hard work, and it's my sanctuary. And now that it's also my remote office, it does give me the greatest satisfaction and fulfillment to know that, it's my little American dream, my piece of the pie. I'm not traveling all over. I would consider that to be probably giving me the greatest satisfaction is owning my own home, and having a full-time job for the state.
What is the best piece of professional or personal advice that you've ever been given?
The best piece of advice I'd ever been given was a passing statement by a friend at a bar. And he said to me, "Nothing will change in an instant." That was the best advice, because one of the leadership skills that I'm trying to work on is patience. I'm very passionate about the work, and sometimes I can get a little too excited and people get offended. Not offended, but So I would have to say he was absolutely right. Nothing does change in an instant. But certainly we could think about what could be changed and how quickly that, that could be accomplished.
Tell us one thing about yourself that we wouldn't be able to find from a Google search or that we haven't discussed yet today.
No, Joey Lee, when I saw that question, I was like, oh, maybe I should Google Melanie Bachman. And, there are two things you will find out about me, but I'm certainly not, I don't do any social networking or anything like that. And one thing you probably won't find is that I have pet snake, and I've had a pet snake since college. But that's one thing you won't find out. I did find out some very interesting things. There are other Melanie Bachmans. There's one in Ohio who could be my daughter. She's definitely a little more active in social media than I ever would be. There's a dairy farmer and a real estate agent. And then there's a Melissa Bachman, who's a huntress. And I found that to be quite amusing. If only I were named Melissa, it'd be a whole different person. But that's what I was kind of surprised when I looked it up. So I said, well, a lot of people do know that I have a pet snake, but a lot of people don't. And I will tell you this, that, children do get used to your routines, right? So you go to work and they go to daycare, and it's very routine oriented. Snakes are the same way. And when I would come home on many nights after a public comment session with a snake face sticking there waiting at the door. So, there are challenges, and, night work isn't exactly everyone's preference. And if you're a municipal lawyer, you're going to end up at the night hearings anyway, but it is very rewarding, and there's always something to learn. You learn something new every day. So if anyone's contemplating, entering into the energy field or the environment field, certainly I would encourage it.
If you didn't do what you do now, what would you do? If you could go back and choose a different career path, what would that look like? What would that be?
I think I would have been a special agent for the FBI.
And what drew you to that?
I say that because I didn't know what it entailed until I took a course with the FBI and the Citizens Academy. And had I not gotten married, had I known about the FBI special agent program at that time, I would have done it in a heartbeat.
Interesting. We have a great one additional question I'll ask you before we wrap up, which came in, which is, and you talked about that you grew up surrounded by Audubon Society lands, and part of the Connecticut Siting Council's role is to ensure that there's not a substantial adverse environmental effect on various things, including natural and cultural resources. Are there any hidden gems in the state of Connecticut that you love that people should definitely find time to check out?
Well, close to home, literally a hike up the mountain, is Castle Craig in Meriden. I would recommend you could drive up if you're not a hiker, but it is a gem. It gives you a nice view around, this area. You could climb up on top of the little castle. I have to mention that one of our former members is responsible for the utility infrastructure up at the mountain, Mr. Ashton, who is a Meriden resident, and that's my favorite. Clearly, it might be a little biased, but that's my favorite gem in the state. Otherwise, Litchfield has a lot of nice scenic overlooks, and just about everywhere. That's the beauty of the Siting Council job. We've all learned about, a lot of 169 different municipalities and parks and their resources. So,
Well, Melanie, I've really enjoyed this hour. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences with us. We really appreciate it. I'd also like to thank again our sponsors. I hope that everyone enjoyed this program. This AMA was recorded and it will be available in about 90 days on our YouTube channel. So you can share this very inspiring discussion with others if you'd like to. Thank you all very much, and please consider attending our bonus AMA on Friday. Happy International Women's Day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Melanie.